that was written by, I forget the arachnologist's name. I'll send it to you and you can link it at the end for the references. Where the scientists took black widows and they poked them like 300 times and they pinched them 300 times. And what they found was, which kind of goes into, and I'll talk a little bit later about Claire's question. They found that they will do 4 levels of defenses before they'll bite. And the only way to get a black widow to bite is if you pinch them repeatedly. So they're like super difficult to get to bite. So it's interesting that.
That's really cool. Yeah, it goes back to like,
you got the story.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to start with some hive keeping as always, because we are bees. I explained this to Andrea. She's not like, what? So chapter 4 opens tomorrow. Like we went over today, which is all about chemical divergence. We are now going to be talking about chemical convergence, and the star of that is going to be the bombardier beetle that blasts acid out of its butt like a machine gun. So I'm excited about that. Y'all should be excited about it too. So be sure, again, to check the badges. Some badges have gone live for chapter 3. Badges will go live for chapter 4 as well. And speaking of which, Audrey, can you bring up Claire's amazing spider PSA that she did? It was so great. I'm gonna like shout you out, Claire. It's like, it like made my heart sing. Yeah, so this is Claire's Instagram post about the spider PSA, and it's a little quiz, and you basically need to say where you would find black widows. If you just wanna, yeah, so like the idea is that you would take a gander, like would you find black widows here or here? And the idea is that, you know, you're not gonna find like black widows just hanging out in the middle of nowhere, and probably not in your garden in like secluded areas. So so not to be afraid of them, and you know, you're not going to find them in your garden randomly. So I thought that was like really creative and really cute. Like the whole setup was really awesome. So I just wanted to give a shout out to her creativity. And yeah, so if you do those, be sure to tag me and send a screenshot in Teams, because sometimes I missed when I get tagged, and I want to make sure that if you do your spider PSA about how lovely and beautiful they are, then I want to make sure you guys get the badge credit. Go Claire, yeah. We did have Claire's permission to shout her out. I wasn't just like, hi, I'm going to like potentially do this thing that might make you uncomfortable. So yeah, we'll ask you if you do something particularly amazing and creative, if we can shout you out. And we'll definitely be doing that with the cards too, because you guys I've seen so far, you guys have made some really amazing cards. So I'm excited to shout some of you out. So the card builder now has chapter 4 arthropods on it. We're now up to like 75 different arthropods you can choose from. I saw a couple of the questions. Y'all were wondering like, oh, what if I pick the same thing that someone else picked? And for now, it's fine. I did think about that. I don't have the best system in the world to avoid it. What I can do is just highlight the ones that have already been picked. So if you want to, you know, make sure that you pick one that no one else has picked, I can just do that for you guys. So maybe I'll just do that. I'll just highlight on the sheet. So if you're going through and you're looking at any of the arthropods and they're highlighted in a color, like the whole row is highlighted, yeah, it will show that someone else picked it. That'd be great. Thanks. All right, cool, Ollie. I'm glad. Yes, I had a good thinkity think about it today. Yep. And then starting, probably not tomorrow, because I have to go to the internet cafe and like I just organize some more things while my computer is dying, so I can get the last little bit of dregs out of it, so that way all of the rest of the chapters open up the way that they're supposed to. But I'm pretty sure on Wednesday, hi Teal, thanks so much for being here, really appreciate it. Saw you pop in. So on Wednesday, I can start doing those little office hour things, especially for those people who live, you know, far, far away in the mystical lands of Australia and Europe, who can't make all the lives. I can at least hang out, and if you guys have any questions specifically about building your cards, or you want any personalized help understanding what's going on with the arthropods and their chemistry, we can have a chat about it. So yes, again, this is meant to be fun. So yeah, so this is meant to be fun. and I want to help you as much as I possibly can to make it fun. All right, well, that's all I have for hive keeping. Andrea, if you'd like to turn your video back on so we can talk all about you, because you're cooler than I am.
Oh, yes.
All right, so I wanted to briefly mention how I got to know Andrea. I met her very briefly at an entomology conference, and she was talking about SciComm, and this was when I was like, I might want to do SciComm. And she was giving a presentation about some of her SciComm stuff, but I also believe it was about like crowdfunding her research, which is like the most badass thing I've ever heard of in my life. And she was like, I want to study tropical spiders, and there wasn't money and there wasn't a grant for it. So I asked my Tumblr community if they like wanted to pay to send me to Ecuador to study spiders, and they did, which was like the coolest thing. I was like, you can do that. So I briefly met her there, and then she ended up actually doing her research at the eco lodge that I was living at for 2 years, but she had just gone there previously, and I showed up at that eco lodge later. So I was like, oh my God, Makipakuna, like that area is so cool. And yeah, now we're friends, and as I live here, I got her visa for her last time, or extended it for her. So we now work pretty
fancy
closely.
Power of attorney. She could have just like stole my identity if she wanted to.
Yeah. Nope. Instead, I studied at the I stood in line at the entrance of the
yes.
the
so
visa
thank
office
you.
for
my
literally an entire day.
Yes. I could have gotten kicked out and arrested, so I really appreciate that.
No worries. Yeah, Alexa, the Eco Lodge, I don't actually work with them anymore for various reasons personally. If you want to know the one that I work with now, that would be El Septimo in that area and Bellavista in that area. That is a long saga about what happened, so we'll leave that maybe for never, but maybe for a different day. Maybe for one of those like 15-minute breakouts in the beginning of one of these lives.
And having been on one of Nancy's tours myself to Septimo, it is incredible and like one of the best places I've ever been on Earth. Not that I've been that many places, but definitely.
This is west side of the Andes cloud forest, yeah?
Yeah, west side of the Andes. It's close. It's in Mindo. It's like actually technically just outside Mindo. So they have like 400 hectares of pristine forest and really nice trails. And
oh yeah, I was gonna come last year. I remember that. Okay.
Yeah,
Next
we should
year,
go this year. Yeah.
I'm in Canada this year.
Oh, well, I mean, there are worse places to be, but it's definitely not Ecuador.
No.
All right, so that's how I know Andrea. Andrea, do you like to introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. Hi, I'm Andrea. Thank you for inviting me, Nancy and Audrey.
Thank you so much for being here. So excited.
It's about time that Nancy and I join forces and do something together. So it's been a long time coming. Yeah, so I'm Andrea, thanks. I'm a PhD student. I'm in my second year up here in beautiful Vancouver. Should I share my screen? Because I have like a little, like very casual presentation.
Yeah, I was gonna like just kind of highlight you as a person first, and then I figured I'd give you the pushing, and you can do your presentation. So
yeah, so what do you want to know?
What do you consider yourself? Do you consider yourself an arachnologist, an ecologist, an entomologist?
So I'm supposed to answer that I am a theoretical ecologist first and an arachnologist second, but to tell you the truth, I'm definitely a naturalist first. I've been a big bug nerd since I was a little girl, and this is actually my second career. I was a Hollywood nightclub bartender for my first career, and I'll talk a little bit about my story in my presentation. So I did that for many years. I made a lot more money than I ever will as a scientist, but so yeah, so I say I'm a tropical ecologist / arachnologist. But yeah, I mean, I do this because I love science and I love ecology. I love answering ecological questions, but at the end of the day, I just really like spiders and I really like insects as well. So yeah, so that's why I did a career switch and went back and got my BS, and then I decided to do my MS, and then I did this stupid decision to do my PhD.
So how did you choose spiders? Did you always love spiders?
Great question. Yeah, so I always liked spiders. I have a soft spot for the misunderstood, but I really wanted to be an entomologist. And during my last semester of my undergrad, I went to Ecuador for the first time. And I did this like tropical semester where we had to come up with 2 research projects, one on a vertebrate and one on anything we wanted. And of course I was like, I want to do insects. So I go down there and I try all these different insect projects. They don't work. I wanted to work with wasps. And I just kept on coming back to this idea that I got about spiders. And I think somebody asked me about this, and you can ask me about my master's work. I'm not going to present on it, but so I came up with this like just organic idea about spiders, and they were like, this is publishable, which is still not published, but gonna work on that. And that turned into my master's project. And so I went, like you said, and I crowdfunded because I didn't have any funding as a master's student. So I crowdfunded, went back to Ecuador the next year, and I've been going to Ecuador ever since for almost 6 years now.
That's amazing. So, can you tell us a little bit about your master's research? Just kind of like, if you were to give it an elevator pitch.
Yeah, my elevator speech. So what did I study in my master's? Oh my God, it only took me forever to get it. So I was looking at, so you have different guilds of organisms. So you can think of a guild as like doing the thing the same way as other unrelated organisms. So in my case, it was hunting strategy. So there are 5 main guilds of hunters there's many of them, but I looked at 5 of them. So you have your ambush predators, your cursorial, which are your like wandering predators. You also have fishing spiders, and many different types of spiders will actually run on water, and they will actually fish for like mosquito larvae or even tadpoles. You have your web builders, which is what I study now. And you have your foliage runners, which will literally hunt off of vegetation. So I wanted to see if there's like a mathematical way to test from their body shape, like of all these different species of spiders, if you build a web, are you going to be shaped the same way? And if you run, are you going to be shaped the same way? So it's a lot like convergent evolution. So if you think about it, what I found, it was really, really cool. So the answer is yes. You can plug it into this multivariate thing, and it's like, boom, you can predict just by the shape of that spider what it's doing for its lifestyle, which is a really cool way to look at evolution. So one of the things I found that I love is fishing spiders had a tendency to have really, really wide toes. And these are completely unrelated, different families of spider. If you do this fishing thing, you have paddles on your toes. If you are a web builder, you had a really fat butt because you had to hold those big silk glands. You had to, do this suspension, and they had a really, really long 4th leg, because if you think about it, they're not going out front and like grabbing their prey, they're throwing silk with their 4th leg. Yeah, so and wandering spiders, which if you think about where they have to run through, like take a wolf spider, for instance, it's running through the grass to capture its prey, super elongated, streamlined body. So it's like all these things are adaptive for their specific hunting strategy, and it's very predictable. So yeah, that's my master's research in a nutshell, and it got rejected twice. So I'm still working on getting that published. So stay tuned. Hopefully someday it'll get published.
That's really interesting, because we have talked about several times at this point, like form equals function, that you can kind of look at an organism and understand what it's doing in the environment, because the environment and the laws of physics are the same regardless if you are a spider, a bird, an airplane, or whatever. So I think that's a really cool way that you could like mathematically show basically what was happening. I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
Go
ahead.
Do you have a favorite spider or any cool spider biology that you want to shout out?
Yeah, so I do have a favorite spider. Well, I have several. There are several that have a soft spot in my soul for. Like, I love black widows. I love brown recluse, just because, like I said, I have a soft spot for the misunderstood. And there's so much misinformation surrounding these animals. But like my tattoo, I don't know if you can see it, that is the eye arrangement of one of my favorite families of spider, where is she? Hold on one sec. Which is wandering spiders, Tenidae. They're from South America. We have them in North America too, but they're not nearly as diverse. So this is a Brazilian wandering spider. This is number 40. She is the world's most venomous spider, and she bit me. So, so I would say this is my favorite spider because it's my like arachnology badge of honor that I've been bitten by the world's, and it was my fault. I was completely provoking her because I was trying to measure performance by getting her to run down a racetrack, and she was pissed off and she let me know it. And then I tried to get her back into her enclosure and she nailed me right on the thumb, and I was in the middle of the Ecuadorian Amazon, about 8 hours in Tibatini. So I was about 8 hours away from civilization. So I was a bit nervous, but all I got was a little bit of a fever, and that was it. Because most of the time your body, I'm a healthy adult, it's going to take care of the venom. It's not really a big deal. Don't get bit by one, but still.
But still, if you do, it's not.
There is a risk. But
yeah, I sent Andrea a picture. I was like, oh, I found this cool spider, and if I don't know what it is, I usually put my hand down next to it so you can see scale. And she's like, oh, that's like the most venomous one. I was like, oh, cool. Good thing it literally did nothing when I put my hand next to it.
Yeah, and they're a bit defensive too. They have a bit of an attitude as far as spiders. Most spiders are super shy, but yeah, they got an attitude.
So do you want to go into your presentation? I'm super stoked to see it.
Oh, thanks. So this is pretty casual. Just a little bit about, let's see. Oh, that's the last slide. That's not going to help you. So I'm assuming you guys can see my screen, yeah? Mm-hmm. And my rat.
So cute.
She's the best. Okay, so you already introduced me. I'm a second-year PhD student. I work with Dr. Leticia Avilés. Leticia studies social spiders, which may be why some of you thought I do, but she let me kind of do my own thing. So her work is super cool. She looks at the evolution of sociality in different organisms, and she uses social spiders as her system. And she's Ecuadorian, which was another reason why I chose this lab to join, because I love Ecuador and that's where I wanted to do my work. And it really helps that she's Ecuadorian. So yeah, and one of my lab mates is also Ecuadorian. So we all get to go to Ecuador every year. But I just want to tell you a little bit about my research in general, and if I bore you, you can tell me to shut up. I won't go too sciencey, just for, just to make it more interesting, I think. But so what I study is spiderweb architecture, and when I say spiderwebs are extended phenotypes, all a phenotype is so I don't know the different levels of anybody's your science background. So if you have any questions, please let me know if I'm not explaining it properly or whatever. So all phenotype is a physical trait. So brown hair, blue eyes, brown eyes, all of those things, which is under evolutionary pressure and ecological pressure, right? So all organisms interact with their environment. In the case of spiders, they have this additional phenotype. It's almost like an extension of their body, right? The spider web. And web building spiders, just like any other organisms, they are under selective evolutionary pressure based on the type of webs that they build. So to collect my data, my lab and my office is the Ecuadorian Amazon, which I love very dearly, and I'm so sad that I'm not there for obvious reasons right now. But so I get to go there every year. These are my two wonderful assistants. They're two undergraduates and they're stellar. And I get to just run around the jungle and chase spiders, and that's where I collect all of my data. Then I come home and I analyze those data. So spiderweb architecture, what do I mean? So you have your two-dimensional orbs, which I'm sure everybody is familiar with, and it's a flat structure. And then you have your three-dimensional tangles, which is kind of like either a messy web of silk, like a black widow web, or even some Theridion make these like globe-like structures. And then you have these sheet and tangle webs, which is maybe like a funnel web builder, or even social spiders build this type of web where there's a basket and there's either capture lines above, ends, or below. And so based on these different things, these different structures, you would imagine that they're interacting with their environment in different ways. So if you're a two-dimensional web builder, Blackledge, he writes great papers, I should share them with you. They found that these web builders are out there in the open. That's where they like to build their webs. And you can imagine they're more exposed, they're out in the open, they're just sitting right there on this flat structure. Whereas three-dimensional webs, they almost have like this cage-like environment around the spider. And Blackledge found that these three-dimensional structures might actually serve to protect them from wasp predators, which are a very big predator of spiders. So you have all these different things that are acting on these different situations and these different strategies. And there are, like in ecology, it's all about trade-offs, right? So no strategy is better. And we never say that like you evolve to be better. It's not better, it's just different. And under different circumstances, certain things are, you know, better adapted for those circumstances. So the same thing goes for webs. So the energetic investment up front is much higher for three-dimensional webs. Whereas, you know, two-dimensional webs, super cheap to make, basically. And I know, Nancy, you talked a little bit about like the energetic investment of venom. Same thing goes for spider silk, right? This is a complex mixture of chemicals that they have to produce, and they need a lot of energy to produce that. So there's different strategies to deal with that investment. A paper I'm going to talk about briefly that I just published this year. I think you guys sent it out. Yay, thanks. And we looked at the microhabitat use. And I love it because Claire's Instagram story touched on this a little bit about black widows. Where would you expect to find them? And that's what microhabitat is, right? You have your overall habitat, but they're not going to live anywhere in that overall habitat. They have different places where they, quote unquote, like to build based on the type of web that they're building. And I'll talk about the anti-predator tactics, which we're also looking at, and the differences between those. But first, my paper in January that just came out, we found something super cool that three-dimensional webs, which this is a great photo of a Brazilian three-dimensional web builder, I think just Theridion, they were actively seeking places to build their webs where they're better protected from rain. And you can imagine it's super intense rain down in the rainforest. And I like to think of this as the difference between renting and owning a home. So three-dimensional web builders, that's their permanent home for the most part. They might have to rebuild if there's like a, you know, something gets destroyed, but for the most part, they're just maintaining it throughout their lives. So it's almost like this big investment up front, like a down payment on a house. You got to make sure you got a really strong roof. But then the two-dimensional web builders, they're building out in the open and they're moving around a lot. They're recycling their web. So there's a lot less energetic investment up front, but they're out there in the open. So what are the differences here, right? So you think about ecology, pros and cons of either one of these situations. Neither one's better than the other. So the cool thing is to know that, like, a lot of people just think that spiders are just robots. They're, you know, they're just acting on instinct. That's not true. These are animals that are adapted to their environment, and they are selecting their environment based on those adaptations. So I think that that's really neat. So yeah, so how do these different trade-offs, like in ecology, why do I care about theoretical ecology? It's always about pros and cons. So I would think if I'm a two-dimensional web builder, we have data to see if they're getting more prey flow, whereas this investment in silk is less upfront. But they're out there in the middle of the open, right? So how are they dealing with more, like being like high predators? They might be more at risk for predation. And then quite the opposite for the three-dimensional webs. And this is just a summary of that. I won't bore you with that because I pretty much just said everything. So yeah, all pros and cons to these different types of strategies. But then with that, if there's these different level of protection, another paper we are currently working on, I think that's what, yep, that is what I'm going to talk about, is how do these two-dimensional web builders that are out in the open, and then the three-dimensional web builders that are more protected and in their, you know, microhabitats that are more protected as well, how are they dealing with, you know, not getting eaten by birds or by wasps, by other spiders? Just like any other organism, spiders have anti-predator strategies. So we hypothesize that spiders with more protective webs, i.e. three-dimensional web builders, will be less likely to have armor such as spines or, you know, these big thorny type structures and really thick exoskeletons. And anti-predator coloration, like either super cryptic, like camouflage, or very, very bright, aposematic means like warning coloration, like I am very venomous, leave me alone. Or more offensive behaviors compared to spiders with less protective webs. So that's my two-dimensional web builders. So how we did this was I went to the Amazon and we rated them from a scale from most cryptic. This just means camouflage. This here is a cyclosa, and cyclosa make this trash line. They are a two-dimensional orb weaver, but they sit right in the middle of that trash line. And I promise you, like, sometimes I have to poke it to find where the spider is because it is so camouflaged. There's another really cool example of cyclosa that the spider will actually hang its shed exoskeleton from its web as decoys. This is an amazing genus of spider. So they're super, super cryptic, and they use that strategy to hide out in the open, which is really cool. And then neutral, you know, kind of just brown, not really cryptic, not really bright. And then most aposematic, or this is a microthena, super bright coloration, leave me alone, I'm venomous, I don't taste good, whatever it's trying to tell its predators, right? And it's got this armor.
So those guys also glow under UV light. The micrantha.
Do they?
Yeah, if you shine a UV light at them, they light up like a Christmas tree. It's really
okay,
cool.
So that's good to know because so my two undergrad co-authors presented this work at the Arachnology conference, and that was actually one of the questions. They were like, "Did you look at UV?" And we're like, "No."
No. Yeah. Well, I bring people out all the time to do night walks, and I can let you know everything that glows in the forest.
Actually,
but they're definitely one of them. They're really beautiful.
Sidebar, collect me some data, we'll collaborate.
All right, cool. Let me know what to shine my UV flashlight at, get some pictures and send your way.
Maybe we'll just do it together and just collect some data. Yeah, because that was a very good point that was brought up, because insects, I'm sure you probably touched on this either in your workshops or on your YouTube channel, insects are seeing their environment in a completely different way than we are. And they can see so many different spectrums of UV light and all these things. So there's this whole realm of coloration that I didn't take into account because I'm thinking like a vertebrate, right? So it's a really, really good point. Hopefully the reviewers won't think of it. But yeah, so that's a really good point. And I would like to look at that more because wasps and other spiders are the ones that are a lot of the time eating these animals, right? So they probably are using UV in some way or shape or form.
And we know that wasps are very visually acute to UV as they're picking up like flower signals as well. And a lot of flowers like glow under UV. There's actually in the reference section, Audrey, please remind me. I can post, there's a really amazing Instagram where the guy just takes pictures of flowers under UV light, and it literally looks like Avatar. It's so beautiful. They glow all these different colors, and that's what a lot of insects and arthropods are tuning into. So if you are aposematically colored in this like UV fluorescence range, you can be telling your signals to a whole swash of different organisms. Even some birds can see UV. Like hummingbirds will pick sorry, I would like steal your thunder, but it's like hummingbirds will steal food from the spider webs as well. So like a whole bunch of different birds can see aposematic coloration.
They also take
UV light.
Don't they make some of their nests out of spider webs as well?
Yeah, yeah, it's so cool. Yeah, everyone's like, oh, hummingbirds, so cute. They like fly around and sip nectar. I'm like, yeah, and they also steal food out of spider webs, use spider webs to build their webs, just are downright insect predators because protein is necessary.
Yeah, and they're super territorial. If you ever sit and watch a hummingbird feeder, they're just fighting like crazy. Yeah, everybody's scared of spiders. You should be scared of hummingbirds. That's the real fierce animals. Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, I'm gonna bug you about that later. All right, so the same thing, we did that with armor. So smoothest was 0, most armored was 5. I actually have that spider, that exact spider. One of my least favorite parts of my jobs, I have to collect my spiders for specimens, but these were just extra ones. I don't know, can you see her? She's I just pinned her last night. She's beautiful. That's another microthena from the foothills. Yeah, so why aren't you working? Oh yeah. Okay, so we also assessed anti-predator behavior by basically poking spiders, and then we scaled what their defense was from 2 to -2. And with all this, what we found, just in a nutshell, is yes, our hypothesis is supported that, you know, two-dimensional web builders are more likely to either be super cryptic, have big spines, and or be aposematic. And this makes sense because if you think about it, they're out in the open. This is a diurnal spider that I just showed you her body here. They're sitting diurnal, day active. They're sitting out in the middle of their web. They're probably getting eaten by birds and all these other things. They want to scream like, I'm venomous, leave me alone. I taste like crap. Like I have these big spines. But if you were a three-dimensional web builder and you had the spines, you'd be tearing down your own web. So that would be very maladaptive under that situation. So there's all these different things that work in some ways for some organisms, but they wouldn't work in others. So I hope that makes sense as far as like the ecological theory behind it. So those are some of my projects that I'm currently working on. And why do we even care about this stuff? Why are you listening to me drone on about my science? So it's really cool because in ecological theory, we're using organisms to tie it into the broader ecological theory. And here are these organisms that are showing us that all organisms have these strategies, whether it's on their bodies themselves or these outside structures, right, that they're building. So like, just like a beaver builds a dam, if you build a crappy dam, you're not going to be as good at getting mates or as good as getting food, or I'm not a mammologist, but whatever they use their dams for, right? So it's the same thing with spiders, and it's just reinforcing that whole, you know, evolution, how cool it is, how these different organisms are just dealing with different selective predators within their environment. And these organisms are super old. They're like 300 million years old. So nature always has a lot of surprises, and I love it. And so, yeah, so I hope you enjoy my science. But I'm going to switch gears for just 2 minutes. I have 2 slides, and I want to talk about a quick project that I'm very passionate about. That's a lot different than my other projects. My committee has—
Y'all go join her group in Facebook. She has like 10,000 members or something. I send everyone who has spider questions to your group because I'm like, I don't know anything about spiders. You're linked on the Ask an Entomologist under references for spiders.
Oh, that's awesome.
For that reason.
Yeah, I should.
So everyone go and hang out in Andrea's spider group, especially if you want any answers to spider questions, because I'm kind of useless when it comes to spiders.
Maybe not Claire though, well, Claire's mom can. We are an adult only group, which Claire, when you turn 18, we curse a lot and we talk a lot about other, you know, stuff that's adult content, because that's what biology is sometimes, right? So, but anyway, so yeah, so I'm really passionate about SciComm, just like Nancy is, and that's why I'm so excited to be here and that you included me. And my boss finally agreed to let me do this project, and she was very reluctant about it at first, but my committee has signed off on it and is going to be a part of my thesis, because science communication is a very hot button topic right now. And, you know, we were talking earlier about like my first career. I was a nightclub bartender. And, you know, you can imagine if you're in Hollywood and I was working as a bartender, my friends were all actors and models and, you know, no bug people whatsoever. So I had this weird, lonely passion. And so I started a bug blog, which was basically just my bug journal. And I don't know why it got very popular. And I have 170,000 followers now. And that's how I did the crowdfunding, like Nancy was saying. And I started to meet other people that also like bugs. And I was like, oh my God, there's other nerds out there. And then I started meeting actual entomologists and, you know, started getting involved in this community that I'm really passionate about. And I was like, well, this is silly. I'm going to go back to school. And I went back to school in my 30s and I got my bachelor's of science in my 30s. And then I was like, well, I guess I got to do a master's and I guess I'm a biologist. So I really credit my entire, like the reason I'm here doing a PhD was solely because of this experience with science communication. So another group that I started, and Nancy touched on, was this spider and bug questions with the bug girl. I started that because I kept on getting added to all these mom groups, even though I'm not a mom, on Facebook, because people are like, is this spider going to kill my kids? And I'm like, no. And I was like, just add me to the group. It's too many messages. I can't handle all these darn messages. And then they asked me to start my own group. So it started out with me and like a bunch of moms. And it kept growing. You know, we have 15,000 people, and experts like Nancy are in there and help me answer questions, other biologists. And we really built this community, and we lovingly call it Bug Book. So I want to test whether or not this Bug Book situation is an effective mean of science communication. And there's a lot of science out there on Twitter. Twitter, if you tweet your science, you're more likely to get cited by other scientists. It's very good for science to scientist interaction and keeping up with scientists. But as a scientist, you have to have at least, there was a paper that came out, at least 1,000 members to really reach one person in the general public. So you have to be, you know, like Nancy is very good at reaching the general public, but that's because she's got a really, really good following, you know, but I'm sure at first you weren't reaching the general public on Twitter. So I want to show that these Facebook groups are also an effective tool. And I did a quick poll, and as you can see here, it was just a quick and dirty one. 305 people were fearful or disgusted of spiders before they joined the Facebook group. And I want to use surveys to quantify how effective Facebook is as a tool in SciComm. And the reason I'm super passionate about this is posts like this. Like this woman, Kimberly, joined because her son's obsessed with spiders. And now she's like, knowledge is power, and I'm not scared anymore. And, you know, the kittens of the arachnid world, the salticid, everybody, like they're gateway spiders, right? Even though they're bold and fierce. You know, they going from being scared of these animals or not having an appreciation to like opening up this whole new world for people that's all around them that they ignored before. And then, you know, my favorite, X-mushers. Like these are really important animals. Obviously, I love them. I study them. So we don't want people going around killing them and you know, reinforcing this culture of fear around these animals because it is learned. It's not evolutionary. So this is just a way to like spread this type of learning. And I think it's really important, and it's going to like bleed into other aspects of science, which in our country, Nancy, the States, is super important right now because science is under attack. So and a lot of people have distrust in science, and this is a really good way to just reach the general public. So that's what my basically my favorite project of my thesis. Don't tell my boss. She's like, you're supposed to love the science. But yeah, so that's my presentation. Here's a great photo by Gel. He's one of our members. He lets me use all of his photos. And that's a great three-dimensional little globe. He's in Brazil, actually. So yeah, I'll take any questions with that.
So I've been watching the chat a little bit. I know Alexa said that she likes that we talk about birds so much in this workshop, even though it's about bugs. And I just want to touch on that a second. It's like, you know, we're talking about animals in an ecosystem, and they've got predators and that are insects and obviously vertebrates as well. So it's just natural that we'll talk about birds a lot and other vertebrates as well when we're talking about these adaptations, because you can't really just talk about one piece of an ecosystem without talking about all the other things that are affecting it as well. It's like we're all in this together, so we have to at least touch on some of the other things.
Yeah.
I think Nick said that he doesn't feel so bad starting out over in his 30s. So thanks for sharing your story.
Oh, thanks.
And I think it was Sierra just said it was a heartwarming origin story as well.
Oh,
so.
Thank you.
So much support.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. So Audrey, do you want to? I sent you the list of questions that I found on Teams, but right before we went live. So do you want to read those? And
so yes. So I don't know, did I say this already? So I'm a theoretical ecologist. I am not a chemist. So just disclosure, so I really appreciate it. Like I learned a lot just from, you know, reading from your questions, because I was like, I don't know the answer to that. So like, Google and find some stuff out. So yeah, this is really cool for me too.
Nice.
I took
yeah.
organic chemistry in my undergrad and then completely passed it and then forgot about it, right?
I never took organic chemistry.
Yeah,
and here I am doing this. One thing that I also want to talk about is, especially chapter 4 opens tomorrow, and I think this is going to be such a great kind of lead in. But we talk a lot about in chapter 4 about how necessary it is to keep the reactive form of your toxin or whatever molecule you're using away from your body. So you usually keep it in a stable form of some sort. So as Derek was mentioning with the millipedes, like hydrogen cyanide is bound to a certain type of oil before it comes out and is the toxic form of hydrogen cyanide, which we talk about in chapter 4. I have a whole diagram for that, but it's like a little bit of a teaser. And the same thing happens with the bombardier beetle. When it blasts out that hot acid, it's kept in a stable form until the moment that they need to use it. And you can see that exact same thing, which is why it's so cool. It's why I talked about this in the convergent evolution section of this workshop, because spider silk has to work the same way. Andrew, do you want to talk a little bit about how spider silk is formed? You don't need the actual chemicals, but just kind of like pretty generally.
I'm like, I know, like this again.
Very generally.
Not my field. Yeah,
we do not need the biochemical pathways. Just like.
Well, I think Claire had a great question. I believe it was Claire about the different types of silk. Mm-hmm. And I linked Hibekeeping does a lot of work with, there's e-crebolate spiders and there's crebolate spiders. So depending on which type of spider you are, and all spiders in evolutionary history started out as crebolate, which basically there's this like comb on their leg where they can like take the silk and make it like staticky. It also comes out liquid first, right? And then they do this and then it gets like almost like Velcro, which is really super cool. But then, so that's formed by a special like organ on their underside where the spinnerets are. But then you have like spiders that are e-crebolate, like black widows, or we talk about black widows a lot today, which are therodiids. That's their family, which make like a sticky web, and which makes sense. And there's even orb webs that are sticky, which it makes sense that would be really good for capturing prey. Yeah, so I don't know a lot about, they have silk glands. I know that web builders have bigger, so all spiders produce silk and they use it in some capacity, but not all spiders make webs. So I study web building spiders now. Yeah, but not the chemistry behind it.
No, that's totally okay.
But that's a whole field, and it's, and it's widely studied because there's so much commercial use for this super cool chemical. Like, I know Nancy, you were talking about them trying to splice it into goat milks because
I get that question a lot.
Spiders, because they eat each other, it's not very economic. So.
Yeah, so they try to inject spider proteins, make a genetically modified goat so it produces spider proteins in the milk. Spider silk proteins in the milk, but as it turns out, you need spider butt. The spider butt is apparently the most important thing in the process. So the goat just made proteins, but it never became silk. Yeah. And I think
it makes sense, because if you look at the spinnerets, like, again, like this is outside of my field, but like how it, like if you look at electron microscope photos of silk coming out, it's like spigots and it's like specialized structures, and it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. And spiders also have, I'm not exactly familiar with all the chemistry that's going, but they basically have a similar kind of reaction going where like the spider silk is kept liquid and then it's only becomes solid when they are making the web. And that's really important because you don't want your butt to plug up, right? You can't have like the sticky hardened form of silk just like in you all the time, because how would you get it out? How would you lay it? How do you put it down? So these systems of keeping your reactive form of whatever it is separate from when it's in its stable form is really important. So you don't plug up important holes. You can use it the way that it's meant to be. And, you don't, in the case of these millipedes, you don't poison yourself. So I think when you guys go into chapter 4 and you see these examples, especially we talk about 2 different reaction chambers that have independently evolved twice, you can keep spider silk in there too. And we talked about the velvet worm in chapter 1 that shoots those the nozzle jets with that sticky string that comes out, and it's like the same kind of thing that's happening, like that only becomes crystallized when it hits the air, so that way their spigots don't jam up either. So it's a really important thing in ecology and the animal's biology in general to keep those forms separate. So Audrey, you want to have out the questions?
Yes. So I'm just going to go in the order that you sent them to me. I don't know if that's...
Okay, good. There was no order that I sent them to you in.
Cool. All right, so this first one is from Alexa, and I think it's a multi-part, but I'll just read the whole thing. So I have a question that doesn't necessarily belong to a specific chapter, but I've heard people say this about spiders too, so why not here? Nancy, maybe you've experienced this in Ecuador. In Costa Rica, people say, apologies in advance for my Spanish.
Can't be worse than mine.
Me orino un bicho?
Yeah, it's like a bug peed on me.
Yeah, as in a bug or spider peed on me, like all the time. Do spiders release defensive compounds? I've heard people reference insects like roaches as peeing on them when I never knew they even emitted defense chemicals. I guess if I think about it, those large red forest roaches, they smell when you step on them. What is that roach smell? What purpose does it serve? And do roaches and spiders release skin irritating compounds?
That's a great question.
So, I can answer from the cockroach side. You will see a couple cockroaches in your card builder now for that exact reason. And we talk about one very briefly in chapter 4. Yes, they can release a whole bunch of different sprays. Some of them are benzoquinones. I think one of them is formic acid. Some of them are like terpenes, I believe. Anyway, they're in the card builder sheet. So yes, cockroaches definitely can have defensive sprays. And I didn't know that either until I read the Secret Weapons book by Thomas Eisner, which is also linked in our reference section. And probably the most interesting example, which isn't in the card builder because I had no way to really quantify it because we don't really know what it is, but the megablatus. Audrey, can you bring up the photo of the megablatus? I'm so sad. I should have sent you the picture of it on my face, but I don't know, maybe you can Google like Nancy and Facebook and maybe it'll show up. Anyway, the megablatus is like a 4-inch cockroach. It's like this big. And the nymphs, I saw a couple of nymphs. I had no idea what was going on. I thought they were injured, but they emit this like sticky goo from the end of their abdomen, and it just covers the last 2 plates on the top of their body. And it's like this sticky, slimy, smelly, gunky goo gunk. I have no better adjectives than that, apparently. But yeah, so they can also release that.
Nancy,
that type of chemical.
How do you spell that?
Megablatus, Megablatus, I believe. Sure, ask the dyslexic person to spell something. Great, good idea. That'll get you close enough, probably.
So should I answer the spider side?
Yes, you answer the spider side.
Okay. So as far as chemicals are concerned, as defensive chemicals, I'm not 100% sure that there's any. There probably is. This is going to tie into another question that someone had that I read earlier, my answer. But so there is an example of a few species of tarantula that will literally throw poop at you. And if you can imagine, like just like grasshoppers sometimes will just like throw up. Like it's like a startle tactic, right? Like nobody wants to get crapped on. I've been crapped on by way too many spiders. But you know, the act of like throwing crap at you, it's like, whoa, like I don't want that to happen. So it's a really good defensive strategy. It's not exactly I guess it is chemical, but because somebody said earlier about, you know, the bugs peeing on you, so it's kind of the same idea. And then kind of tying into a different question, which was, do spiders only inject venom? The answer is no. There is one example of a family of spiders called spitting spiders that will spit, just like you talked about the velvet worms. Very similar situation, similar strategy. They spit venom and a glue-like substance onto their prey and or at potential predators to startle them. So that is an example that, you know, they're not just injecting their venom, and they are using it a little bit in a more defensive manner as well as for, you know, eating. So
I believe the spitting spiders are in your card builder. So I definitely remember researching that one and I meant to put it in. So if it's not there, I will add it, but take a check because that is one of the organisms you can build as well as the spitting spider. And
toadies, they're really cool. Yeah.
I really like the spiders that use their webs in like creative ways, like the net casting spiders and the spitting spiders are so cool.
Those are so cool. And Yeah, they're one of the examples of, I just learned this today actually, because I didn't know this. I didn't realize that they were acribulate spiders. So that net that they have acts like Velcro when they grab their prey, which is pretty amazing.
Audrey, do you want to look up the net casting spiders?
Sure.
Spitting spiders sound amazing. Yeah, they're really cool, Claire. Super, super cool. And then after you're done looking that up, you can read the next question.
Oh my God, their faces are so cute.
The spitting spiders, well, the spitting spiders' faces, they have like this really like dome-like head. They're really cute too.
We'll look them both up. We'll look them both up.
Oh,
Right,
yeah.
yeah. So these are the net casting spiders. They're also called ogre face spiders. And their eyes glow under UV. If you look up Nikki Bay UV ogre face spider, you'll see, actually you should do that. Yeah, that first one. Yeah, there you go.
That's amazing.
Nikki Bay is a member of the groups too. He's in Bug Book, so.
Yeah, Nikki Bay is an amazing, amazing photographer. I've talked to him he's really interested in like UV fluorescence of various organisms. So I actually had a whole talk with him about how some of the spiders here glow like, he usually gets these really pretty bluish colors, but a lot of the spiders, at least here in Ecuador, glow more greenish, almost on the yellow side. So we had a whole chat about that one day.
And one of my favorite things too, even without the UV light, is some families of spiders have eye shine. So wolf spiders are one of the families, and so are tenids. So if you go out in the field, you have and it's dark and you have a bright headlamp, you'll see like sparkly green throughout the grass. And you can do this in your backyard, and that's spider eye shine, and that's really, really cool.
It's one of the easiest ways to find them, because they're kind of, a lot of them are just kind of brown and on the ground. You'd miss them otherwise.
Yep.
So
yeah, when I was collecting for my master's, that's how I found them, because it's no use with web building spiders because they have really crappy eyesight, right? So they're using more vibrational cues and pheromones in their silk, which you guys, they are communicating with chemicals as well. And they, like a female, I'm going off a tangent again, but this is related to the topic of the workshop, I guess. They're putting female spiders, when they're ready to mate and when they become mature adults, they will put pheromones in their silk and dragline silk, and that's how the males smell out the females. So we don't really think of spiders as smelling, but they do. Yeah.
Yeah,
they cute?
here's a spitting spider.
They're so cute.
So cute.
And I believe they're worldwide. So if you, I think that they're introduced worldwide. So you can find them in your house a lot. They might not be native to where you are, but they are there. Yeah.
There's no UV picture of them yet.
Yeah, there probably isn't.
All right, next question. Oops. Did we lose Nancy?
Bye. She's in Ecuador, so
Okay.
Very finicky.
Here.
Okay, good.
Okay. Next question is all spider venom injected? Is there any type that they carry or use that would be exposed on their exoskeleton?
Yeah, so that was the question I was thinking of with the spitting spider. That's one of the exceptions, that they do spit their venom. An interesting thing is not all spiders are venomous. There's a small family called the Uluborids that it's not a very diverse family. I actually just posted one yesterday. I found one in here in Vancouver, and they used to be, their ancestors were venomous, but they secondarily lost their venom in evolutionary time. And what they do instead is they crush their prey, and they have these specialized front legs, and they crush it up. And so anytime you find an Uluborid, it usually has this big ball of disgusting mashed up. I don't know. I think I'd rather be envenomated. I'm not sure. I don't know which way first to go.
It's like mashed together.
Yeah.
Mashing potatoes.
But yeah, and they're one of the cribulate spiders. They have that like Velcro-y, and so yeah, so that's really interesting. So the spitting spider is the only one I can think of that does anything with the venom outside of its
Lynx spiders have recently been shown that they can spray their venom, but the venom itself hasn't been. So the venom itself, I don't have. Where's the book? Hold on. Hold on. I have it. This is one of the books that the class is based off of. Anyway, yeah, so lynx spiders have been recently shown that they can spray their venom. So I'm gonna hold this up to the camera as best as possible. And so this is the spider, and it's on a type of paper that detects when it's gotten wet or has a chemical reaction, and it has sprayed the venom.
Oh, how cool is that?
By just like spitting on it. Yeah, it's really cool. We don't really know what's in the venom. We don't really know much about the venom itself, but we know that it can spit it, kind of like a cobra. But that's all we know about it, which is probably why you hadn't like read or heard about it, because it literally is like one page in this book.
I wonder if it's like, so one thing that people don't realize with spiders is how they eat, and like, so I wonder if there's like a corrosive agent. So there's two separate things that go on. So a lot of people think that spiders inject their fangs and then like suck it up like a straw, and that's not what happens at all. What they do is they inject their venom just to immobilize the prey. And then they take their mouth, which has like a specialized sucking stomach, and they basically like throw up digestive enzymes onto it, and then they digest their prey from the outside, you know, and like slurp it up. So they still have a mouth and the fangs. So they're two separate things going on. So I wonder if that venom, just like in the spitting spider, has like the gluey stuff and digestive properties. I wonder if their venom, like the lynx spider, has some like corrosive property or something.
Sounds like something
Why
that
would
you
it
should study.
Yeah, no, I'm not a chemist. But yeah, because it wouldn't make any sense though if it didn't, because why would you waste that venom and spit on it? Because essentially venom is useless unless you're a spitting spider that I know of, unless you inject it. Like if you inject it or you get it on your skin, it's not going to do anything. So it has to be taken into your bloodstream in order to be harmful. So why would that have evolved to be so wasteful in a lynx spider? There's got to be something.
This sounds like a paper.
Sounds like a paper for one of my graduate students in 5 years.
Pawn it off on them. I have a lynx spider sitting out in this one little leaf that it's been, I guess it's its home. So if you need a lynx spider for studies, I've got one on hand.
Yeah, they're cool. They're cute.
Any other questions, Audrey?
Well, in the chat, Alexa said you should mention vegetarian spiders.
Oh yeah,
yes.
There's one exception. Gary, is that how? What's the name of the? I'm an arachnologist. It's the name of oh my god! It's the name of the panther in the Jungle Book.
Bagheera?
Yes, thank you, Bagheera. So I wasn't that far.
Also, I googled this. I would like to take credit for knowing that, but I just googled it, so just wanted to.
So that genus is a neotropical spider that still will eat insects, but it's opportunistically a vegetarian. It eats the little seed pods that are on acacias, I think that's the
it's Beltian body. So those are like proteinaceous structures that are there to encourage ants to eat them. So the ants live inside the acacia, so they sting anything that's there. So yeah, the spiders are eating those. There's kind of like not the target market, but
and there's studies that a lot of these like tomicids, which are like your flower crab spiders, that are ambush predators that sit on flowers and wait for pollinators to come. There's a lot of evidence that they are supplementing their diet with pollen. There's also examples, which I find fascinating. A lot of recluse spiders will scavenge because they're just so shy. They are not bold spiders at all. They got their name
so
from
cute.
Unlike jumping spiders, which are super bold. But yeah, so they're a lot more opportunistic spiders in general than we like to think of them as like strictly carnivorous. And I don't even think in even like most spider species, I think it's a little bit more opportunistic than we think it is.
I mean, it would make sense. I mean, a lot of your top tier predators are also opportunistic. Like think of bears, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And even things that we tend to think, like a lot of people, they'll come to the jungle and be like, oh, toucans, so cute. What do they eat? I'm like, oh yeah, fruit and baby birds and anything else that can fit into their face.
Yeah, exactly.
With that serrated bill, just honk, honk, honk. So
way to go.
Right. Being eaten by a toucan is really not one of the ways I want to go. Yeah, so I think a lot of people are surprised that a lot of these different animals, whether it be arthropods or birds or vertebrates, like fall outside of what we consider like what we like to put them in a certain box. Because it makes sense. Like, you're hungry, there's other things that you need to supplement your diet. Like, butterflies are nectar feeders, except when males sit on dead fish and eat dead fish proteins. So you got to get those things in you somehow.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
All right, Audrey.
All right, next one is stink bugs release a smell that attracts others to them when they are killed, and the green lynx spider can eat these insects. When it's finished eating them, will the stink bug still release a scent, or will the stink bug's scent glands be all dissolved as a part of the meal?
Nancy and I, we almost had a chat about this before, because I was like, I don't know the answer to this. We could take guesses, I think. I said I think it would be dissolved if it was a spider eating it, but and a lot of spiders won't even touch those things, but some will. Some are just like,
yeah, that's about what I came to the conclusion as well. Like, so we do have some evidence, as you guys saw. No, not yet. Chapter 4 is coming. It depends on how the predator gets a hold of it. So if the spider does a good job and just like one shot kills it and injects the venom, that venom is probably going to shut everything down fast enough that the stink bug won't be able to deploy. And if that's the case, then the spider is probably just going to live its best life and, inject the venom and scoop all the delicious slushy out with its mouth. Its slushy tongue slurpier thing. That would be my guess.
Well, maybe if it's an ovoborid, that the crushing ones that make that meatball, maybe that would stink. I
would imagine. Yeah, probably nothing chemical is going on there. So I'm guessing, because it's a muscle that makes those glands fire. So if especially your neurotoxic spiders, I'm guessing are just shutting that down super fast. If the arthropod doesn't get a chance to deploy, I imagine that it's just as tasty as any other, and it's just going to dissolve everything on the inside and drink it up. What would really be important is to understand how those chemicals are being held in the stink bug. So in some cases, like as Derek was showing us in the millipedes, those glands are very heavily kind of sclerotized, so they're thick or rubbery or made out of the same stuff that the exoskeleton is in the same density. So those probably wouldn't dissolve, but there are other types of arthropods that have just very simple storage glands that are just a thin membrane, and those might dissolve. Regardless, I feel like if the spider got a good hold on it, it would probably eat it, and then the stink bug would be dead. If the spider didn't get a good hold of it, I imagine it would be blasted in the face and probably not like that very much. That'd be my 2 cents on the subject.
If it gets caught in a web, it's probably going to start freaking out, release that chemical. And I just attended a talk not too long ago where they found that, I forget where this paper was, but they found that I think it was the net casting spiders actually, that they actually reject quite a bit of their prey, which is super interesting, because you would think that they would be a lot like, so you'll see spiders get stuff in their web and they're like, I don't want that. And they just kick it out of their web. And it's like,
they'll cut it out and let it go.
Yeah. So that's pretty interesting too. I didn't know that. I would think that, just save it for later. You got that silk, but I guess they have preferences just like anything else.
Not the stinky stink bug.
Yeah.
You'll see an example of that kind of predator thing show up in chapter 4 with a millipede. If the millipede has time to deploy, the toad will vomit it up. If the millipede doesn't have time to deploy, the toad just eats it and continues on with its best life. So, and then that'll be reflected again in chapter 5 when we talk about the hard exoskeletons and super painful stings of the bullet ant and the tarantula hawk. So you're going to see that come up a couple times.
Did Derek by chance, Nancy, touch on the lemurs and them using the giant millipedes to get stoned?
No.
I always meant to ask a biologist that studies millipedes, and he's the only biologist I know that studies millipedes. So maybe I should just ask him. But yeah, I think that the ring-tailed lemurs will pass around the giant millipedes and like mess with them and then sniff them and get stoned with millipedes, and then puff, puff, give it to the next lemur, which is fascinating. And I don't remember where I read that, but we should probably bother.
We should fact check that. I know what I'm asking. What I'm asking Derek.
I'll ask him.
All right, cool.
I'll email you the answer.
All right, sounds good. All right, Audrey, other questions?
Yeah, we have a couple more from Claire. She asked, do spiders always release venom when they bite, or do they have control over whether or not they want to use it?
This is an excellent question. Yes, they absolutely have control of their bite. That same study that I mentioned about the poking and the pinching of the black widows, they found that even when a black widow would bite, it usually gave a dry bite. And it all goes back to that whole thing that Nancy was talking about earlier. You know, venom is super energetically costly to produce. They need it to, you know, eat. So they don't want, you know, I hate using the word want because it's anthropomorphizing, but just whatever. They don't want to waste it because they need it to eat. And, you know, there's a lot of myths surrounding, you know, people are like, oh, I got a spider bite. It's like, no, like I almost guarantee you, I am probably one of the only people in this room that has been bitten by a spider. And that is only because I have manhandled, well, except for Joe, apparently, I have manhandled thousands and thousands and thousands of them, like literally go up to them, grab them. And I've still only been bitten a handful of times. And the reason for this is because of that. They don't want to waste that venom. They need it, right? So if you do corner one though, and it has to bite, that's its last resort, it's still not going to want to give you a lot of venom. It's going to want to just get away. You know, I still want to hold on to my precious venom because I need it to immobilize insects. The black widow situation, which is super interesting. I didn't talk about the levels of defensiveness, is a little bit of a tangent, but the first level of defense is flee, right? Any animal is going to try to get away. The next evidence, or the next level of defense was drop out of the web and play dead. Spiders are notorious for doing that. They curl around their abdomen because their abdomen is really, really vulnerable. And the last, well, besides the very, very last resort is biting, right? It goes dry bite, then venomous bite. So this is just showing you how hard it is to get a spider to bite you. The fourth level is something that I've only seen a black widow do once, and it's really cute. And you really got to piss them off. And this is chemical too. Oh, and this actually answers one of the questions from earlier about chemical defenses. So what a black widow will do, rather than throwing poop at you, they will stand on their cephalothorax, their head, right? And start kicking silk at you. And it's super cute because you know they're angry, but it's like, what is that going to do? Like you have a neurotoxin that if you gave me a full delivery, you could put me in the hospital. Here you are standing on your head, kicking silk at me. So, so that just demonstrates another chemical defense that they do have, and they are more likely to use than giving you a dry bite. I think what the venom glands are formed, it depends on species, very early in the instars, but they're just physically too small to give you enough venom to do anything. So amount of venom is also important. 99% of spiders are harmless, and even the ones that aren't really that big of a deal, but yeah. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, and
I talked a little bit something similar, but I use the example of tarantulas where they like curl up into a little ball and then they like throw their legs up in the air and then they'll kick hairs off at you and the whole 9 yards of like all the behavior these animals do before they bite you, because even snakes do a whole bunch of behaviors they want to do before they want to bite you for the exact same reason. Yeah,
and like I equate it to like everybody says like, oh, I got a spider bite. It's like the chances that are a spider bite, it's kind of the same, like it just goes against their basic biology, right? So they don't want to eat our blood. They don't want to, like, they want nothing to do with us. They don't have any reason to bite us and waste their venom on us. And I just like think of it as like, it's as ridiculous as calling something a squirrel bite. Like if you're walking down the street, what are the chances that you're going to get bit by a squirrel? Slim to none. But if you grab a squirrel, it's going to bite you, you know? So just don't grab a spider and you get bit by a spider. It's really that simple. Yeah, so another tangent.
I like them. All right, Audrey.
Last one from Claire is, how many different types of spiderweb strands can a black widow produce? Again, on the black widow train.
Yeah, I didn't know the answer to this. I tried to find it and I didn't know. I do know that they are ecreblets, so they do make that sticky silk. We should look up like how many spinnerets and how that's produced, like how many strands at once, because I would think that it is more than one strand because of the type of web that they build, but I actually don't know the answer to that question. We'd have to do a lit search, and I'm sorry I didn't run out of time for that. That's a good
There's
question.
also like different kinds of silk as well. There's like the silk that stabilizes the web. There's the sticky silk that's there to like capture the prey. So that's all intense chemistry.
Yeah, like scaffolding, like then there's dragline silk, then there's, you know, silk that you, like if you look at a black widow, again, their egg sac is silk, but it looks like paper mache. It's totally different than the web. So like even within a species, they're using silk in multiple different ways.
Next question. Oops, wrong tab. Okay. This person says, I would love to hear about Andrea's Ecuadorian project relating spider morphology and predicted behavior among the 5 possibilities. But I think you touched on that in your talk.
I did. I gave my elevator speech with that, but if you have an additional follow-up question, I feel free to throw it in the chat and I'd be happy to answer. I don't want to worry you with all of my like multivariate stats and stuff. I mean, I do have presentations for that work, but
and
just
then
let me know if you have any other questions if I didn't touch on.
Yeah, Gilles said that you covered it, so he was happy with the answer you provided.
And he also has another question. He said, the northern black widow is now present in Quebec, where I live. I took this photo of a female that was found with 3 sacks of eggs, including an empty one. So it is clearly established and not just an accidental observation. We also found and I don't know how to pronounce this correctly, but Frurolithus festivus specimen for the first in Canada. And I'm wondering,
first web spider, maybe?
Yeah, it just has the scientific name, but
let's okay.
The question is, I'm wondering if the rate of spider territorial expansion in general is faster due to climate change factors, or if it just keeps expanding at a natural speed.
Yeah, that was a great question. So I did it's a really complicated question. And so I reached out to Catherine Scott because I wanted to know her thoughts on this. So as far as
Catherine Scott, for those of you who don't know, she's one of the people who runs the spider blog, and specifically the webpage that I sent you all to, Recluse or Not. She's one of the arachnologists whose brain that came out of. So yeah, so she's a really prominent figure in arachnology.
And her study system in her PhD was black widows specifically. So whenever I want to nerd out about black widows and I don't know the answer, I just email her. So I did email her about this because I had a few thoughts going into it as an ecologist and as an arachnologist. So one thing you need to know about spiders, even in comparison to like a lot of different species of insects. So there are nearly 50,000 species of spider, but they're so incredibly understudied, it's ridiculous. So just as an example, Nancy and I go to the entomology conference, right? There are at times, like 2,000-3,000 people at those conferences, Nancy? Yeah. These are huge conferences. I went to the international conference for arachnology. There were 400 people there. So that just puts it into perspective. Like if you know an arachnologist unless they study silk or venom, which is like chemistry, if they're an ecologist and they study spiders, like chances are I probably know their name or know them personally. It's just because it's a small world. So with it, there's a reason I'm telling you this. The reason for that is because they're so understudied, we know hardly anything about their ecology, and that includes their ranges. So I reached out to Catherine and I was like, hey, I found this paper. It talks about range expansion of the northern black widow, and I think it was the purse web weaver, and it ended up being a collaborator of hers, of course, small world. And, what are your thoughts on this? It makes it sound like they're expanding, but like, I almost wonder, were they always just there and we just didn't know? And she told me, she wrote me back, and I think Nancy's gonna end up sharing her response with you all. And she wrote back and said a few different interesting things. She's like, I think that there is a slight bit of expansions. I'm trying to remember exactly what she said, but for the most part, I guess northern black widows is something I didn't know. They're not as closely associated with human dwellings as other black widow species, like the western black widow, brown widows, which are a type of widow as well in the same genus. And for that reason, you might not encounter them as much. They also, black widows need very, very specific types of microhabitat, which you guys learned all about in that really cool thing that you did. So yes, they can be in Canada, but they can't go too much more northern than any time soon in Canada. It's just not hospitable for them. Even within like homes and stuff, because they're not really indoor spiders. So I don't see that species expanding too much more. But yeah, so it's a question of, are they expanding or are we just learning where they are? And it's a tough question to answer. A lot of other things too, if you talk about like invasive species, not all introduced animals are technically invasive, because a lot of introduced animals, especially spiders that are mostly predatory, they are only going to be associated with humans. Like if you look at some cellar spiders, it's like, or you call them daddy long legs or whatever, they're found throughout the world. They're in almost everybody's home, and they're introduced in everywhere that they are, except for where they're from. And you know, they're not having any effect on the ecosystem because they're not invasive. They're just introduced, and they're only going to stay. They're not going to go into natural populations and affect natural native animals. And that happens a lot with spiders because they're predatory. I think that they don't take over, even with like climate change. They don't spread in the same way that a lot of insects will and become like, you know, pests as an invasive species. It's just they have different biology. So I don't know if that is too much of a tangent and goes off on the point, but I thought that was a really cool question. And I reached out to Catherine because I was like, what do you think? She's like, she doesn't think it's going to expand too much anytime soon either.
Sheila just mentioned in the comment, Audrey, can you read that? Because it popped up too quickly for me to
he said the northern black widow that was found under, the northern black widow that was found was under a septic tank cover close to a home for sure. That could be why it was noticed.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
So the next question is from William, and it says, so we saw both neuro and cytotoxic venoms in spiders. Do we see the other two types, chemotoxic and proteolytic, like we see in snakes, or they have not had a reason to develop them yet?
That was a great question too.
A quick distinction, hemolytic is affecting your blood, and proteolytic is like affecting the proteins that are in your body. It's like breaking those down. So just like make sure we're all on the same page with the terminology.
Yeah, so I this was another one, because I don't know much about venom properties itself, that I had never heard of, you know, spider venom being described that way, other than either necrotic or neurotoxic. So I did some reading on this, and it sounds to me like those types of venom are specifically adapted to deal with, like, so spiders don't have blood per se, they have hemolymph, right? So it sounds to me like those types of venoms are vertebrate specific adaptations. And also, as far as the glands that they come out of are also vertebrate specific. So short answer, from what I gathered from my very minimal, you know, reading about venom, is the answer is no.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say as well. I wasn't sure if you had researched that, Andrea, but yeah. So like snakes have chemolytic properties in their venom, just because like we have blood in like the traditional sense, where we have blood that's in veins with like blood cells with lots of different things that's going on, especially like with insects, which are the main prey of spiders. Insects, as Andrea just said, it's hemolymph. We call it blood when we're communicating it to other people because we don't have like a good word for it otherwise. But it's basically just like sugar-based liquid that's just hanging around, and there are some quote unquote blood cells, but they're not carrying oxygen because the oxygen can just diffuse from the tracheal system throughout the whole body of the insect. So you don't have blood cells that are oxygen carriers, except for very rare instances where you have organisms that live in polluted areas that might have an oxygen carrier, but it's not, it's like there's like one out of all of them. So the hemolytic blood or like venom like wouldn't do anything to an arthropod prey because there's nothing really in the blood to attack, quote unquote. The blood cells that they do have are there with the immune system to kind of plug up damaged holes and surround like infectious bodies basically. So if they are like infected by a fungus, for example, you'd have like kind of this encapsulation and scarring effect, but it's not like blood. And so there's no point in like a lot of the hemolytic blood as well, like makes the blood clot. And so you die really quickly because we're a vertebrate. And so there's like nowhere for that blood to go because it's like triggered all these clotting factors. But again, that just wouldn't really work with insects because their blood is just like hanging out in them and it's like a sugar molecule slush kind of on the inside. So it just wouldn't work. Some spiders have proteases, which are breaking down proteins as like an accessory, but it seems to be more to like help the venom flow throughout the body rather than specifically there to like break something down. So the best way to kill an insect quickly is to go at its nervous system. And if you look at that from our chemistry, like what we do in pest control as well, like that's what almost all pesticides do. They're almost all neurotoxic and shut down the insect's body really quickly.
That's really cool.
Fun fact. Can be related all around. Yeah, us and spiders have the same strategy for killing insects because it's the best one to do. Convergence.
That's really cool.
William has another question. It says, here in the States, most hospitals carry atropine for seizures and organophosphate poisonings. Do they do the same thing in Australia in case of funnel webs?
Yeah, that was another one that I said, Nancy, I don't know the answer to this. I'm assuming that hospitals do because what my understanding, I study New World spiders, I study neotropical spiders. So I have a little bit of, background with Old World spiders, but not as much. And my understanding is that funnel web, there hasn't been a funnel web death in Australia since the early 60s, I believe. And the reason for that, I believe, was because of they made the anti-venom, anti-venin, or however you want to say it. And I would imagine that maybe not all, but at least a big portion of, at least in the cities, that they would carry it.
Yeah,
I don't know.
That's what I found in my research when I was preparing the course as well. And I think I don't think I sent it to you, Audrey, but I remember William specifically asked like, oh, what if you're in the middle of the outback or whatever? It turns out that the Sydney funnel web spider actually lives pretty commonly within cities. Mm-hmm. It's pretty associated with humans and human habitat, so that's one of the reasons why it can also be potentially so dangerous. One of the things that I get on my soapbox a lot is people are like, oh, you like the most deadly snake, the most deadly spider. Like, okay, sure, maybe it can kill a pigeon 15 times over, but it lives in an area that humans almost never are. So the point is moot. So like Australia has all the crazy deadliest snakes whatsoever. But the cobra is actually the deadliest in the amount of people it kills because cobras live where people do in India. Mm-hmm. So like the Sydney funnel web spider lives in pretty close association and around human habitat. So I don't think if you're out in the middle of the outback, you're going to be bitten by one of these things and you're going to need the 8-hour car ride to the hospital. You're more likely going to get bitten just like, I don't know, going to your friend's house and then be taken to the hospital, which would be relatively close because you're in the city. And Australia's population, 80% of Australia's population lives on the coast. The only reason I know this because I lived in Australia for 3 months, but so like 80% of the population is on the coast anyway. So not many people are like living out in the middle of the outback. You'd only, have that problem really if you might be a researcher, and it also probably wouldn't be a Sydney funnel web spider because that's not really their habitat.
Yeah, and I'd like to touch on some things that maybe will clarify some things. When we say deadly, the potential for danger and dangerous is two very different things. So the Sydney funnel web and the Brazilian wandering spider are pretty neck and neck with how their potential to be deadly. And like I talked about before, I was bitten by one of those. Do I want to be bitten by a Sydney funnel web? No. But chances are, even if you are bitten by a Sydney funnel web, they're either not going to deliver a full dose of venom. And even if they did, 95% of bites aren't even going to require medical attention. I didn't get medical attention for my bite because I was in the middle of the jungle in a remote situation. And, you know, was I nervous? Yeah. But at the end of the day, like, you're more likely to get killed by a swing set or a cow, or like, so you can't really, like, and I wouldn't call a cow a deadly animal. Or deer, like, people get killed by deer quite often. And, you know, nobody's saying, oh, watch out for those deadly deer, but, you know, there hasn't been a spider death that's confirmed in the United States in, gosh, at least 100 years. And even then, like, it's like, probably wasn't even a spider. So, you know, the danger of calling even the Sydney funnel web really dangerous or deadly is really kind of blown out of proportion, because they don't want to eat us.
Alexa, can you read that question, Audrey?
Yeah.
That just popped up in the chat.
Alexa said, I asked a question earlier that I think we missed. 9 messages up from this one. Sorry, Alexa.
Sorry. About
orb weaving spiders cutting still insects out of the web and whether or not that is true.
Yeah. So I think it varies by species. Some, and this is orb web weavers and three-dimensional weavers as well. Some spiders are very, very tidy. And some spiders are slobs. Black widows are slobs. They will crap in their web and leave it there. You know, they'll have dead insects. They'll have live insects just sitting there that they don't feel like eating, and they'll just leave it there. They don't even care. Total slobs, but there are some web builders, like some orb weavers, that are super tidy. And if they don't want to eat, what is it you said? I think whichever insects. I think you said lacewings earlier. If they don't want to, if they're not in the mood to eat that insect, yeah, they'll just throw it, cut it out. But I think it really does vary by the taxa, because, you know, just like people are, some of us are sloppier than others, so are spiders. My lab mate studies social spiders, Anelosmos, and she has a great paper about hygiene behavior, and she has footage of some of these spiders backing up out of their another tangent here, out of their basket, because they build this like three-dimensional sheet and tangle web, and they'll put their butts over the edge of the basket to poo. And if you think about it, it makes sense though, because if you're living in a community of social animals, if you start crapping in your web, like, diseases are going to go around, blah, blah, blah. So that's another tangent, but I think that's pretty cool.
It is.
Alexa, you were also talking about, I think, the lacewings. I heard that. It's funny because I just happened to be on the page of lacewings as I was trying to find a picture of spider webs. Anyway, here are like the sticky droplets of the spider web that's attached to the lacewing wing. And the lacewings actually have a behavior where they will very slowly like cut themselves out of the web when the spider isn't paying attention. So if the lacewing gets stuck in the web, it won't flutter a whole lot to like panic and alert the spider what's going on. It gets stuck and like very carefully will like cut free its legs and its antenna and just kind of just drop out of the web. So they have like a really interesting behavior. I highly recommend this book, by the way.
Yeah, I should read that. I have my,
as you can tell, mine has gotten quite a bit of reading. It's like everything's highlighted in it. Yeah.
For this next question, I'm going to screen share because it's has a picture to go along with it.
Mine arrived today, yay.
Oh
yeah, Andrea and I go on tangents all the time. Like, it's so dangerous that we're here together in the same Zoom meeting because, like, y'all.
Yeah, so I know what that spider is. I'm so glad because I'm not a taxonomist either. So this would be really embarrassing if I was like, I have no idea what that is.
Especially because it's from California and you lived in California for a while.
Yeah, very true. But yeah, I do know what this one is. This is a slender crab spider. And they get confused. I mean, it's a little blurry, so I'd say I'm 99% sure. Genus is Tibullus, I think, Tiblllus. If we want to give that a Google and check my brain, how good I am.
Tibullus,
I think it's 1B Tibel. Yeah, there we go. See that first one? I think it's this genus. So this genus, they build like, they're called slender crab spiders, but they like hold their, you get them mixed up with, I was just gonna say, you get them mixed up with another spider. It's called a nursery web spider. They look very similar. But the slender crab spiders will sit on like vegetation, and they're like super camouflaged on like grass and stuff. So that's why they like hold their legs up like that. So I'm almost positive that's what that is. But did you have, yeah, there it is. Do you believe me? I don't know.
I believe you.
Is there a question
I believe you.
with it? Okay, wait.
No, I think he was just asking what it was, and was like noting that it was particularly well camouflaged in the grass.
Yeah, and you can see why. Like it looks like dead grass, right? Like, it's cool.
Yeah, cool
little spider.
And then we have one more question.
This is so much more fun than doing data analysis, you guys. So thank you. Which is exactly
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, no, my boss is probably. She's probably like, are you working on your proposal? Nope. Nope.
That was actually it. Because I opened.
I remember we got a question from Tom in Teams. I might not have screenshotted it. I think it was attached to the chapter. I think it was in chapter 3, that tab. I remember he had a specific question. It was about the black widow genus, which I can't remember how to, Latrodectus.
You got it.
The genus. Yes. I'm much better, by the way, everyone. I'm so bad at kind of like identification. I'm more like, what is the thing doing and not what the thing is? Because to me, what the thing is relatively boring. I'd much rather know about it. So I'm really horrible with names. Anyway, so I think he was asking about like a different species in the genus Latrodectus. And if they all have the same venoms, or if like, the same types of venoms, or if they are at different potencies.
Yes, so that was about, again, they asked about the Australian redback, which is in the same genus as the black widow. And so, of course, I'm like, another old world question, right? So I'm like, I'm not sure, but I have some ideas about this. So yes, there is variation even within genus of different like potential for like the venom and how like its compounds. It does vary from species to species, and I would imagine, especially with an old world versus a new world species, that it, because they've been separated for so long, there probably is even more differences than say like we have. I don't know if you know this, but we have 3 species of black widow in North America. Native black widows. We have the northern, western, and southern. And you can kind of guess where they live based on those names for the most part. There's some overlap, but and then we also have the non-native brown widow. And I'm going to use the brown widow to answer this question. So the brown widow is not considered medically significant. Even though its properties of its venom is pretty similar to its very close cousin, the black widow. Brown widows, we believe, were originated in South Africa. Not a lot is known about them because their invasion, if they are affecting native black widow populations, it's very new and it's very quick. I know a student by the name of Juan, who is one of our members in my group. He's at CSUM, where I did my master's, researching this topic, which is another tangent, of course, because I'm talking about invasive species. But my point is the brown widow, I believe it's because of the size of their venom glands, they are not as venomous to us. However, like, I don't know the size of the venom of this specific redback that you asked me about. I did a quick Google. I think they're pretty comparable to, because they're all in the same genus. Like species level, you're splitting hairs. They share their closest common ancestor. So And these are really old organisms. So chances are it's probably pretty conserved, I would think. But yeah, again,
from the
venom
reading,
studies as a whole.
the reading that I've done, the reading that I've done has, like, from what I can tell, at least, the widows in general all have the same constituents or parts of their venom, and those are the latrotoxins. And I saw, like, there's alpha and omega and then a couple other ones, and so those latrotoxins are specific to that genus, so it probably has those as well, although maybe it doesn't have all of them. Maybe it doesn't have alpha, which is not only insecticidal but also, you know, against humans. It could have them all in a lower dose. It could have smaller venom glands. I don't know that particular spider, but I would imagine that it has the same parts of the venom, like the same types of venom, because it's in the same genus, but the amounts, exactly which ones it has and how big those venom glands are, all different factors.
That would be my guess as well. And it's interesting because, you know, like with the black widows are like double the size of brown widows. So that I think that's where they get it. And we already talked about, like, their potential to be medically significant is like super, super low, even if you did get bit. So that's why if you're a much smaller spider, it's going to be even like less potential to deliver enough venom. But interestingly, talking about venom, you know, the dreaded brown recluse, which is 99.9% bullshit, and misdiagnosis and misinformation, and, you know, 99% of it's like an ingrown toenail, or, you know, staph infections, even cancer. So this is like a really big problem in the US and elsewhere with all this misinformation, because the actual issue of these ailments don't get treated. And, you know, it's a lot sexier to say a brown recluse bite than it is I got an infected toenail. So with all this misinformation, infections are being misdiagnosed by doctors. I'm told all the time, like, no, you're wrong, my doctor told me. And I'm like, well, I don't go, you know, I'm almost a doctor, and I won't go into a hospital and start telling a surgeon what to do, because I don't know shit about surgery, you know, but they don't know anything about spiders. Why should they? So it's a really big problem. And again, my point roundabout is there are other species of recluse in the United States. There are actually 11 species, at least in the US, of recluse.
Audrey, do you want to bring up a map of brown recluse?
Yeah, and that one's not comprehensive, but it does show that's Rick Vetters, who's, I'm such a fangirl of his. He's the #1. I just sent him a card, actually. I drew it. It was a brown recluse. It was such a dork. He's probably like, who is this weird woman sending me fan mail? He's a scientist. So there's other species of brown recluse, right? Or of recluse in the same genus, just like widows have their genus, and there's all these different widows. There's this one that I know that I've seen in California, in the deserts of California, El Deserta. And people have asked me, is it considered medically significant? And if you really were to push me, I would say it probably is, but it doesn't have the reputation because A, it's unlikely to go into people's homes, so people know less about it. It's much more wild than the brown recluse. Brown recluse love to come into houses in its natural range. But so they are almost nearly identical. Like if you gave me a brown recluse and a desert recluse, I couldn't tell you the difference. We'd have to like really dissect it, whatever. So they are in the same genus, and I bet you their venom is similar, but for whatever reason, we don't consider them medically significant. And a lot of that is just because what we label as medically significant is mostly just based on bullshit, essentially. So yeah, but
tell us how you really feel.
Yeah, it's upsetting because people, you know, they'll still argue with me, and I'm like, well, I'm a scientist that studies spiders, and why? Like, if you're not going to listen to me, like, who are you going to listen to? Like,
yeah, like, why even ask?
Like, I'm citing Rick Vetter, who is he's been studying the brown recluse for 30 years, and just like we were talking about the range maps, for the northern widow, which is less studied, this range map is super solid because he's been working on this for 30 years. This specific species and this specific genus. So like, it's one of the only spiders that we have a really, really solid idea of where these things are. Yeah, so their venom is interesting. It does contain a property, like a lot of people have this idea that, and it's a myth, that if you do have the unlikely chance of a bite, which is super unlikely, but even if you were to be bitten, it's like less than 10% of bites become necrotic. And even if they did become necrotic, it's probably just a little bit and it goes away on its own. But there are cases where it gets bad. And in those cases, you know, what the heck was my point here? I lost it. I was talking about the recluse. Yeah, so it's just all completely blown. Oh, so there's a myth that's what I was going to say about secondary infection. They're like, it's a myth. It's secondary infection that causes from brown recluse bite. That's a myth. There's a paper that Rick Vetter put out about spider venom property. Spider venom has antimicrobial properties in it. The chances of any spider bite becoming infected is slim to none. So that's a myth. So if somebody's saying, oh, I got an infection from a spider bite, total myth. There is a compound in brown recluse venom, and it's the compound itself. Don't ask me what it's called. We have to look it up. It begins with an S. And
Phenethylamine D.
Yay, thank you.
That was in the chapter. So.
Oh, good. Yeah, so that's actually what's causing the very, very, very extremely rare, very rare potential for necrosis is actually the protein in the venom. So that's really, so yeah, I guess chemistry is kind of cool, you know.
Yeah, see?
As long as it's attached to a spider or an insect, right? So.
Right, it should be. Yeah, I didn't actually know that the venom had antimicrobial factors. Because I actually said that in the videos, like, oh, if you get bitten, it's always good to just put topical antibiotic on it just in case.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what I've always been told, right? Like, it's kind of logical if you think about it. It's like you now have 2 holes in you, so make sure stuff doesn't get in there. So that's really interesting. I will correct the video for the next time we run this.
Yeah, and you just touched on another good myth. So the tool, like, I'll get people argue with me. No, I know it's a spider bite because there's 2 holes, 2 punctures.
Mm-hmm.
So
I talked about that a little bit.
Oh,
sure.
good.
Like, yeah, when you see that, it's usually one bug has bitten you twice because they're too far away. The puncture, you can't normally see them.
Yes, and most spiders, except for tarantulas and actually funnel webs, the mygalomorphs, their fangs are like this, like typical fangs, right? But the other spiders that people are like brown recluse, their fangs face inward. So getting a small spider like a brown recluse to have to, like, it would have to be like this big. And you're going to tell me like something this big bit you and you didn't see it? Like, there's no way. I highly recommend, you know, Fangirl, Brown Recluse Spiders. This is by Rick Vetter. This is an excellent read, and it's super informative. And he talks a lot about, you know, venom compounds and stuff. So, you know, it's also a really good read if you're interested in spider.
Dad, put it on my Christmas list.
Oh, good.
I knew you're here.
Yes, and when I met him, he took a picture with me and he signed my book, and I was like, totally like,
oh, that's adorable.
If you follow me on Instagram, you see me like total dork, like so excited to meet. He's like my, you know, this is a total tangent, but I was working in Hollywood for 20 years, right? And my ex is an actor and a well-known actor, and so I was surrounded by celebrities quite often, and I was like, I never gave a shit. I like bugs, right? But like Rick Vetter, I'm like, oh, it's like such a dork. Like those are my celebrities, right? But yeah.
Audrey, we got a couple of questions in the chat, I thought. I think Sierra said something.
Yeah, well, Alexis said, isn't the Australian redback the one where the male will suicide flip into the female's mouth after mating because it increases their fitness?
That's a good question. I don't know. I know that there's a lot of examples of, again, I don't know a lot about old world spiders, but there's a lot of examples of this sexual cannibalism that is, I don't want to say voluntary, but it's like simultaneous sexual cannibalism. And what ends up happening, just like I'm sure you know in bees and stuff, where the male's genitals explode into the female's essentially vagina, even though it's not a vagina. And that forms a mating plug because spiders, just like insects can store sperm for years. So if you're a male, you want your sperm to be the one to fertilize her eggs. So what happens in this somersault thing, and I don't know if it's that species as well, but there's a species of Argiope orb-weaver where the male, upon essentially ejaculation, will literally just die. And then his entire body becomes, and this is just like a common garden spider that you'll find all the time in your yard. And, you know, you see the females and this is how they have sex. Like the male bodies will fuse inside of the female's epigynum. And then his body, his dead body, then blocks other males from mating with him. There are other examples of, so I don't know if everybody knows how spiders have sex. So they have, Nancy, have you covered this? Should I?
I have not. Go for it.
Okay. It's one of my favorite things to cover. I tell my students, and because I teach intro bio, right? And I have to be careful how I explain it because one time I said something very inappropriate, but Claire's here, so I can't say it now, but I'll tell you guys later. You can email me and I'll tell you. So how spiders have sex is, and this is a really cool example of just, you know, we talk about convergent evolution. You know, we're all sexual organisms are doing the same damn thing, and we're just doing it in a slightly different way. So spiders have what are called pedipalps in the front of their face. And these are kind of like arms. You can imagine if you had all of your appendages were the same size, it'd be really hard to eat a hamburger, right? So they have these little like arm-like appendages, both males and females. And that's what they use to kind of like manipulate prey. And they will hold it just like you would hold a hamburger. They'll walk with them a little bit. And the males have, when they reach sexual maturity, they get like these specially modified ones. They almost look like boxing gloves in a lot of species, and some of them are super elaborate. And what they do with these is they go to their genital pore, which is where you would think it was, and they grab their sperm in their pedipalps, and then they literally take their arms and punch them into the female. And the female has a vagina-like structure called the epigynum, and that's how they have sex. And so it's this basically, sorry, Claire's mom, but I mean, that is biology, right? So it's essentially, you can think of it like sex being adaptive in many different organisms. It's the same thing that we do. It's just different. There's an organ that is delivering the sperm that is attached to the male. It's this going into the female and depositing it, right? It's the same thing. So this happens in biology over and over and over again. And it's super interesting because in spiders and in insects, because they can store their sperm, that's a lot of sperm competition between males.
Choose.
So what's this?
And choose. The females can choose which sperm
Yes,
they use.
and they can. And usually there's choice for the first male that delivers us. There's first male choice, but not always. It could be the last male, depending on the species. So you could think it'd be, if you're a seasonal male, you don't, most spiders, the males live half as long as the females. That's why most spiders, the females are huge comparison. There's other reasons, because eggs are expensive, sperm's cheap, but that's a whole other ecological discussion. But in some of these species of the somersaulting ones and like the ones that do this like crazy sexual cannibalism stuff, the males will like, one of their palps will like break off and become fused into the female. So can you imagine if this stuff happened in humans? We'd be walking around with stuff like fused in our bodies, dead men hanging from female bodies. Like, that's crazy. Like, nature is nuts. It's so cool. You can think of why it's like adaptive, right? Like, it makes sense. But yeah, so that's how spiders have sex. And yes, there are species that do these somersault things. There are also species where it was adaptive for the male, like, not to want to get eaten, where there's examples of, rape in spiders, where he will literally take the female and in jumping spiders, some species, and like lasso her down and tie her down because she's much bigger than him. And so he can mate with her while she's tied. So it's, all these different strategies to get around the same problem, right? Which is having babies. It's all about fitness and having babies, and yeah, all the different strategies. There's my sex tangent.
Audrey, I think there was one more comment from Sierra all the way at the bottom, and then we'll have to wrap it up because we have been here for a while. Andrea and I have gone on a tangent or two at this point.
It was just the funny comment by Sierra saying, I've heard of someone who went to summer camp and was so scared of getting bitten by a brown recluse in the restrooms that he got so constipated that he was then hospitalized. How ironic.
That's amazing,
That's amazing.
right? So that just goes to show
Womp
you,
womp.
constipation is way more dangerous and way more deadly than stomach.
That is
Amazing.
That's hilarious.
Honestly, that's a great
Well, I think we're gonna. Yeah, it's a great ending. We're done. I wanted to thank, first of all, Andrea for spending so much of her time here with us. I wanted to thank all of you. I know that some of you had to come and some of you had to leave. That's totally understandable. This went really long. I appreciate all of you coming, saying hi, being here, and giving Andrea your love and asking all of your excellent questions. That's part of the reason why this took so long. And thank you so much, Andrea, for being here. If we could all just say bye.
On this stuff. Yeah, thank you.
If we could say bye to Andrea in the chat so she can see it.
you.
Thank you, everyone.
Then I'll chat with you on Messenger for a second afterwards, Nancy, if that's cool.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, awesome.
All right.
Well, thank you guys for
Everyone
having me.
say bye to you.
All right, bye.
All right, bye. Thank you, everyone. Bye. Bye-bye. This was great, says Marta. Excellent.
Oh, should I just stay here for a minute with you, Nancy?
Audrey's hosting it. I don't know if she can kick everyone out. Bye, everybody.
Oh, that was so sweet.